All right, so we are live, and here we go. Okay. Welcome back to CBO Speaks, the podcast where we explore the strategy, leadership, and real-world decision-making behind today's most impactful organizations. I'm your host, Melissa Farley. Today's episode is a masterclass in what it truly means to manage complexity at scale. We're joined by Bryan Swarthout, Vice President for Finance and Administration at Vassar College. With more than 2 decades of experience spanning both corporate and higher education, Bryan oversees an expansive portfolio that includes everything from financial planning and compliance to facilities, capital projects, risk management, and endowment strategy. In other words, if it keeps an institution running, growing, and future-proofed, it likely runs through Bryan's world. Today, we're diving into the intersection of finance, operations, and leadership and what it takes to steward resources responsibly while still innovating for the future. Let's dive right in. Bryan, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm curious. You have built a career across both corporate and higher education spaces. What initially drew you to financial management, and how did that path lead you to Vassar?
Yeah, so I knew from an early age that I wanted to be in finance. My dad had a small business, and because of situation, I went to work with him as a kid, and so that was daycare for me. And I saw how financials touched just about everything, and so that drew me kind of the financial business. And after spending a little more than 10 years at IBM, which was a big organization, I learned a lot of great experience, but I decided it was time to try something else. I wasn't quite sure what that something else was. I started looking and applying selectively to things that looked kind of interesting. And in that search, I stumbled upon this budget director role at Vassar, which looked a lot like work I was doing at IBM. So I decided to apply. And during that interview process, I learned a lot about Vassar. And I saw it was a role as something I could learn from and where I could add some value, and decided to try it out. At the time, I had really no expectation for how long I would be at Vassar. But 14 years later, here I am still and really enjoying it.
Yeah, I had an accidental journalism career for like 19 years, so I get it.
There you go.
Yeah. What are so I'm curious, you went from IBM to Vassar. What were some of the biggest differences or learning curves that you experienced between going from a corporate finance world to the higher ed world?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a significant difference between a 400,000 employee IBM and a 1,000 employee Vassar. And some of those changes, some of those differences I've learned through my time are indicative across higher ed. And I would really focus on 3 things. First, decentralization. IBM was a very centrally managed organization, particularly from the financial controls. And when you get to higher ed, it's very decentralized. Departments have all kinds of autonomy to work within, particularly as it relates to how they use their funds. The next one is collaboration. In higher ed, a larger group of people are involved or invited to provide input, at least, into decision making. Allows us to get a lot of great perspectives, can get to a better decision through all those different perspectives. But it does mean there's a lot more perspectives, and the conversations also tend to meander a little bit in higher ed, which sometimes leads to this like really interesting input that translates to a great decision. It's like a nugget of gold, perhaps, as you're going along. And sometimes it just means you're way off track. And so for me, as I came from IBM, which was very focused, to this opportunity for broader conversation, the challenge was, how do I know when to pull it back on topic? Because I didn't want to miss out on one of those really interesting things that we might find along the way, but I also didn't want to get too far off track. And initially, that was extremely hard for me. I'm a very much linear thinker. I think a lot of finance people are. I won't say all of us, but a very linear thinker. So as we meandered, it was very stressful. And to sit in those meetings and let it happen was hard. I've gotten more used to it, and I've seen the value, but there's still a challenge of knowing when to kind of pull it back. And then finally is pace. IBM had every quarter, we were reporting results and having things, and so decisions were made very quickly. And I think because of the collaboration, which takes more time to involve people, and because we don't have this quarterly mindset, we're really making decisions around 5-year increments, at least here at Vassar, we have an opportunity to take time to make really good decisions, which is a benefit.
That makes a lot of sense hearing you break that down. I'm thinking about you as a leader going from IBM to Vassar. Were you the same leader? Did you show up the same way, kind of with the same leadership style and approach and strategy at IBM as opposed to Vassar? Or was there something that maybe caused you to pivot or show up a little differently in this role?
So I've always been someone who likes to work with the team, and it's never kind of authoritarian. And I think that was one of the reasons why I maybe started looking beyond Vassar, or I'm sorry, beyond IBM, is because IBM was so kind of hierarchical, centrally controlled. So when I came to Vassar, I actually found that the way in which I approach things actually fit better, I think. And so you talked about your accidental journalism, right? I think I accidentally stumbled into the place where I maybe belong, because I do like to engage in that collaboration. I do see the value in thinking more about empowering people and bringing people into the process to make better decisions. And so I think I maybe found my calling through this work.
Well, that was a cool turn of events. Well
Yeah.
done. Yeah. Okay, let's talk about scope here. Your role touches a lot. We kind of touched on that in the intro. How do you prioritize with such a wide scope like that? And maybe talk a little bit about like the day to day. How are you prioritizing? But also, how are you making those long term plans and prioritizing all of those items as well?
Yeah. So I'm a list maker. Every week I revisit my list of things that I need to make sure get done during the week. And those could be the tactical things or the strategic things that making sure I'm getting to. And also that list will include things that I'm thinking about and maybe just aren't making this week's priority list. And so I start there. The other thing is this is a continual thing. The collaboration tends to lead to a very busy calendar. And so there's a balance in there. So I'm constantly trying to look at my calendar and make sure I'm making space for the strategic things. But one of the things that I am doing is at least once a month, and I try for twice a month, I actually block off a Friday so that I can use that for the strategic work that I need to do. So I'm not getting sucked into the rat race of the everyday thing that you can easily do with all the different meetings and all the different emails and all the different tasks that need to happen. And that allows me to step back from the work and really be strategic in the way and focus on those strategic things that maybe take a little extra time.
What a great tip. Yeah, I think that's so smart. I think a lot of people are hesitant to block off big chunks of time on their calendar, but when it's used well and wisely, it can make a really big impact. Yeah.
And I start with the goal of blocking the whole day. It never works out to get the whole day, but I often get 4 hours out of the day.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm curious with everything that you handle, your typical day, is there a normal day for you, or does each day sort of look different? Like I'm just kind of trying to think about if somebody were wanting to follow in your footsteps, what would they expect their typical workday to look like?
Yeah. So there are certain things that are constant, at least for me in my role at Vassar. I have one-on-ones with the team that I oversee generally every week. I have one with the president every week. I have regular meetings with the rest of the senior team. They're not weekly, but they're periodic. And we have a weekly senior team meeting. So those things are the stability in my calendar. But the breadth of the work, and the other thing I will say about the CBO role is often the other duties as assigned as big as any other role that you might find in the work. And that does make it so that the work is never the same. Which actually is really interesting from my perspective. I love that because I'm constantly learning and constantly getting an opportunity to experience different things. And I think that's what has led me to be here still for 14 years later and still looking forward to the next thing. But it will regularly be different just because of the breadth of the work. And if you've got the right team, then it allows me, because I feel like I do, to focus on things that I need to focus on and get pulled into the other roles and the other work as needed.
I would have been shocked if you said otherwise. If you were like, I do the same thing every day. How?
That would
um,
drive me nuts, honestly.
yeah. I relate to that. Okay. So you mentioned, one of the things that was different about this higher ed environment was people kind of had a say and could be involved with how funds were used and things like that. So I'm wondering, how do you sort of ensure alignment, from the top down when there are so many departments that might have very different goals or very different pressures that they're facing? Tell me about kind of how you handle that.
Yeah, that is a challenge. One of the kind of counter challenge to the benefit of the breadth and the decentralization. And I think we do that here at Vassar through the senior team. So I mentioned in one of the regular activities I do is a meeting with other members of the senior team. This is where on kind of a one-on-one basis, we can talk about the different priorities of their division, the needs that they need from the finance and administration division or vice versa. So we can get on the same page. And then through our collective communications with the teams that we oversee, we can make sure that they are then operating together and working together. One of the things that we have talked about is oftentimes if there is a challenge within the division or across divisions, it usually starts with the relationship at the top. And so we are making sure that the relationships among the senior team continue to be strong, which would then hopefully, and so far has translated into strong relationships among the working team. And so
Mhm.
that is one of the ways in which we do it. It's generally communicated through the senior team to the rest of the division that they oversee and then through their leaders.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good system. Yeah. Okay, I want to do a little bit of, not that we haven't been doing real talk, but I want to talk about a question that I know a lot of people are wondering about and are in, kind of this same boat together, and that is, higher education is facing increasing financial pressure nationwide for lots of different reasons. What are some of the biggest challenges that institutions like Vassar are navigating right now?
I think we're navigating the same challenges. Even though Vassar is blessed with a large endowment, we are still enrollment driven. And so we're trying to make sure we're continuing to maintain strong enrollments. Lots of schools ended up with deferred maintenance. And so trying to find the resources to address the deferred maintenance and continue to have the infrastructure in place is a big part of how we deliver our educational mission. Obviously, the federal government uncertainty is a big area of risk, I would say, in the challenge in which we're facing. And so those are probably the big areas of focus that we're spending our time on right now.
I want to bring up another question that is kind of a hot topic, and I've had so many mixed reactions to this, and that is AI. Are you implementing AI at all in your workflows and in your departments? I'm just curious how Vassar is either embracing or resisting kind of this AI movement right now.
I think if you were to ask the finance administration team versus some of the academic departments, you might get a different answer. But across the board at Vassar, we're exploring. And specifically within finance and administration, we're doing some kind of group exploration. We're all, testing it out and trying different things. And then we get together once a month to talk about share what's been working, what have we had trouble with, and it's been a really good opportunity to kind of dispel a little bit of the fear that some people might have around it's going to take our jobs and how do I even use it? Where do I even begin? And it's also been a bit of a team building opportunity because we can all talk about it and we're getting together to spend some time together on these things. And so we've been doing this probably about a year now, and I've seen the team grow. We have had this broad range from kind of bleeding edge user, getting into bots, creating new things to how do you spell AI again? Right. And so we've now pulled each other along so that we're all using it in different ways to try and find an opportunity to, allow ourselves to be more efficient. And we're looking at it in the ways of, yes, it'll make us more efficient. The organization will likely evolve over time, but we're not looking to cut jobs. And in the short run, it'll allow us to do what we do better. We'll spend less time doing the grunt work and more time in the conversation around how do we effectively help manage the organization. And that fits with the way in which I view our role, which is trusted partners. We're supposed to be here to support the organization, not just to get our work done. And from our perspective. And so getting the time to actually now be engaging more in those conversations is really valuable.
It's encouraging, I think, to hear you talk about AI in that way. I haven't heard someone talk about using that opportunity as a team building experience. So that's really cool to hear that. This is a question that we actually got asked, and that is, can you walk us through? Hold on, my border collie is barking a little close to me. Is he done? Okay. Can you walk us through how long-term financial planning works for an institution with an endowment?
Yeah. Just like anything else, we make assumptions about what's going to happen with the endowment. And that could be things like investment return, inflation. We have a spending rule that we use to take from the endowment. It's purely formulaic, so we can plug that formula in with these assumptions and run out what we expect to be able to draw from the endowment over time. And then we'll do scenario analysis on that as well. We can't control investment return like we can some of the other things in our operating model. So it's important for us to do some of the sensitivity analysis on that. And even at Vassar, though, some people will be envious of this, but only about 30% of our income comes from the endowment. The rest is still very predominantly net student revenue. And so we do kind of pair that with what we're anticipating from our enrollment and student revenue perspective.
Thank you for giving some clarity on that. Let's kind of walk that road a little bit more here. In your role, how do you balance fiscal responsibility with, I'm kind of looking at three major areas, and that is to invest in growth and innovation and also student experience?
Yeah. As a small institution that is not growing enrollment, and that's an intentional decision, we're intending to be small classes, et cetera. Growth or new activities really comes from one of two options. Either it comes from a new gift to the endowment, specifically intended to fund that activity, so it's a new source of revenue from that perspective, or from, I'm going to steal some language from Princeton actually, and what they use is substitution, which means we will stop doing something in order to start doing something else. We do occasionally have some seed money to experiment with things to decide whether it's really worth kind of advancing and moving in that direction. But often long-term, funds for new activities will either come through an endowment gift or substitution from something else.
Okay. Let's switch gears and talk a little bit about risk management. And maybe I shouldn't say a little bit, because I assume that's kind of a huge part of your role and the work that you do. I'm curious how your approach has evolved over the years, and maybe more in recent years as kind of these nationwide pressures have been impacting institutions.
Yeah, so we maintain a list of things that we're watching broadly that cross the institution that don't naturally fit within a division. And that's really what we're focusing on with enterprise risk management. And I am lucky enough to say that I started off doing this in my role. And then in between, we hired our first general counsel. So I have a partner now in thinking about some of those activities beyond just, constantly working with the senior team and the rest of the division about this work. And that has been a really helpful evolution because I will say one thing about careers: you're never an expert in everything, right? And my expertise is really on the operational side, not on the compliance side. And so she augments me. Our general counsel can augment my skill set from the compliance side while I'm focused on the operational side. And we work really well together. And in this environment, we're constantly changing. She has been a great opportunity to review all the different messages coming out from the federal government, because the federal government has been really the key focus for the last year and a half, that then we can work together to translate to the operational side. So So that's one of the things that has changed for us as we're going through.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. I'm not sure that that's a response we've gotten before, and I think that's really fascinating. I'm wondering if you can share. I know you said there are certain things that you're watching, um, but let's go a little general and say, when you're making any kind of high stakes financial decision, are there certain frameworks or principles or things that you're regularly coming to that guide you?
Yeah. So, we're not trying to make a profit, right? So for my time at IBM, it's what's going to have the best return. Here, the conversation is really around what's going to benefit the mission the most as we think about this. And that's where maybe that substitution commentary comes into play, is we're thinking about something that we're doing versus something we may not be doing, but we think we should. There's a conversation around what's the value in either from the educational perspective or the student support services, so that we can better do the work that we're supposed to do. And so all of our decisions are framed by that. And so I probably didn't naturally think to say that while we're having that conversation earlier. So I'm glad you asked the clarity, because it's just ingrained. We don't even think about it. It's really the first question we ask ourselves as we get into these conversations.
That's the journalism. Sometimes you ask like a very similar question, just a little bit different, and you get a whole new answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when I talk to people in finance, I think it can feel similar to rocket science. Like when you're talking to other people in finance, there's a shared language there. But when you're not, I'm curious how you've found success in communicating, complex financial realities to any kind of stakeholder, that doesn't have that shared language or that background as you.
Yeah, I always look for examples in an individual's world that will help them make the connection. So the endowment is a perfect example of one of those complicated things that people don't understand. And I can connect it to their 401(b). It's an asset that they have been building up, and it needs to sustain them through their entire retirement. Just like the endowment needs to sustain the institution for our entire existence, which will hopefully be forever. And if you overspend your retirement money, then you don't have money to use to buy food or whatever else later on. And if we overspend our endowment, we can't continue to do the thing. So that's one example of taking a complicated thing and trying to connect it to something that a person in their everyday life might be able to understand. And I try and look for those examples with every situation that comes out. Some of them are easier than others, but the more you can connect with what people know and experience, the easier it is for them to grasp those technical things that go on in a finance organization or in any organization, really.
Yeah, yeah, great approach. I know a lot of people who listen to this podcast are aspiring to kind of step into, the role that you're in. So I want to spend a little bit of time going back and talking more about leadership.
Mhm.
From your perspective, just everything that you have seen and gone through and your lived experiences, what does a strong leader look like? And I'm particularly thinking about, there's so many people and so many systems that intersect. What are the qualities that a leader should have in this kind of position?
Yeah, so I would say one thing to be thinking about is being comfortable with risk. And any senior level role, you just can't possibly have all the information, and you need to be making decisions based on imperfect information. So there's some risk associated with that, and you can never know exactly what's going to happen, even if you've done all the analysis, as much analysis as you can. So being comfortable with risk is an important aspect of a role, CBO role, in my opinion. For me, I always lead through influence, not necessarily authority. And I find that to be really effective in higher ed. Again, with that decentralization, people have a lot of autonomy. And so influence is a better way to, from my perspective, to get people on board and moving in the same direction. I feel like I've gotten better at that over time. And a lot of that comes from building relationships and trust, which takes time to build in the organization you're at. Because particularly in this day and age, a lot of people are looking at big organizations whether they're higher ed or corporations or the federal government, with suspicion. And so you need to build those relationships, build that trust, and use your influence to guide people instead of just telling them what to do. Which has been a little difficult for me because I'm an introvert. I prefer to be behind the scenes, but I'm an introvert in an extroverted role. And so getting out and building relationships is hard, but it's an important part of the work, I think. And then again, for myself, I kind of take the approach of servant leadership. I view my role as helping others be successful. And through their success, I'm successful in what I need to do. So I give a lot of support to my team, my peers, and others to help them become successful. Now, there's a balance there that you need to make sure, and this is something that I continue to work on myself. Support can also mean accountability. And so if you focus too much on just building the people up, you don't give them an opportunity to build themselves up. And so there's an important aspect of that being a leader, of allowing people to build themselves up and giving them the direction, but letting them go do it themselves. And there's a subtle difference in that, but I think it's kind of important.
A lot of awareness there, and great value that you just contributed. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
You talked earlier about the fact that you have such a solid team allows you to sort of step into some of these different many roles that you're in. Let's talk a little bit about that, about building a team and making sure that you're surrounded by people that that enable you and the department for success.
Mm-hmm. This is one place where I think higher ed does a good role, and that a lot of people get involved in hiring decisions. We have committees. We include other people in kind of second round interviews. It allows for a great opportunity to get perspective on the candidates from from a different perspectives. And one of the things that I'm really clear about from the very beginning is the committees are there to advise me in making my decision, because while they'll have good input, I'm the one who can kind of put it all together, and I understand where the role needs to fit, particularly from some of the technical aspects of that. And so I've used that fairly effectively to find good hires over the years that I've been in this role. And the team has mostly turned over through natural attrition, and the people that we've hired in through that process have been good. And the other thing that we've utilized is networking. We get out and network whenever there's a role open to try and attract people that we know that are strong to the role at Vassar. And again, through some of that, we've had some pretty good success.
I'm going to make a little assumption about Vassar, and feel free to correct me if I am incorrect. But I would assume that an institution like Vassar has a lot of kind of long-standing traditions and things that they've kind of held on to for a long time. And so if a massive change needs to happen, can you talk about how you approach that as a leader, kind of dealing with change inside an organization like Vassar?
Well, I'll tell you about two things. So first, in 2017, Vassar implemented Workday, which is a ERP system that a number of schools have moved to over the last few years. We were kind of early on in it, and we moved fast, and we did not invest enough time in change management. And as a result, it wasn't accepted well, even though it greatly advanced a lot of things that we did, made a lot of things easier, eliminated paper. And that was a really important lesson for us in thinking about these changes going forward, and how important the change management process is. So now, as we are doing new things, like we're going to be implementing a new student information system over the next year or so, there's a lot of upfront effort put in place to help people understand what it is we're thinking about doing, gather input to make sure that as we do it the right way, and to get buy-in along the way. And I think that was a hard lesson for us to learn, but an important one that we implement for both big projects, and we're working on doing a better job of doing it on small things like just policy changes. Right? There's opportunities to engage the right groups to get buy-in and have it across, and that's something we've been implementing pretty broadly now. And I think that fits within the idea of building relationships and engaging and serving the population that our community, and thinking about what we need to do for them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, it does. Okay, we're going to pretend like you have a crystal ball and look into the future 5, 10 years. Um, what are you predicting? What are you seeing as the future of higher education in finance?
So let's say, I think that we are going to need to leverage our relationships stronger, even more so. And relationships are important, but we are in some uncertain times, not just as it relates to what the federal government is doing, but the perception of higher ed by the broader population continues to deteriorate. So there's a lot of uncertainty around what comes. And so we need to make sure that those relationships across the senior team, across the different divisions are strong, because we may find ourselves faced with difficult decisions. And a lot of schools are already facing difficult decisions, as it relates to their enrollment. So building those relationships so that we can make sure that we understand all the different areas of work, and that we can use those relationships to have good conversations about what we need to do is going to be really important. I do think that AI is going to bring some evolution to the work. And I think we need to be able to help our teams through that process. We will get more efficient, but we also need to help people move up the skill set in order to take advantage of what AI can do. And so it will take away some of that grunt work, which means there's going to be a lot more on the analytics. There's going to be a lot more on the engagement with people around the information, again, to help us be better at what we're doing and be better at giving advice. And so we need to help the teams think about growing up that value chain. And if AI does change the work, it may, as it looks like it's going to, it's likely going to change the organizational structure. So I think we need to be thinking about and getting better at understanding organizational workflows, if we're not already, and think about how the organization could change and do it strategically as the opportunity presents itself. In Vassar, as we think about that, as there is turnover, if it makes sense, we will make changes. We're working really hard not to eliminate positions. So that's one of the things. And I think that leadership is about building those relationships with your team so that as we go through this transition, they are trusting in me, and through that, trusting in the organization that we're going to do the right thing as we go through that process. And obviously we're going to have to be watching the market. There is enrollment challenges potentially. There are all kinds of things coming out of the federal government as it relates to potentially constraining international students and what they're expecting us to do as it relates to getting Pell and other things. And so we're going to have to continue to be monitoring that and understanding what that means for us.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I know we talked about AI previously and in just now. I'm wondering again, kind of looking ahead, are there any specific innovations, trends, developments that you're particularly excited about or particularly cautious about as you look forward?
Yeah. So I am going to be interested to watch the trends on enrollment, not just because of the changing demographics, but a lot of because of the perception of higher ed by the population. The perception is deteriorating. Was that going to change how people decide to whether people decide to go to higher ed or not? How is that going to affect people's behavior, and what is that going to mean for employment in the future, and how that affects whether we have enough fully educated people entering the workforce or not? So that's one of the things that I'm watching. I really wish that higher ed could get its own kind of got milk ad as an example to change that perception, because I think that would be important for us. That is one of the things that I'm watching. In Vassar, we are pretty stable in the work that we do. We're a residential institution. We're really attracting those who want that residential experience. But I am watching whether there becomes more of a shift to hybrid and virtual education, whether there's a shift towards more credentialing as opposed to the 4-year degree. And so some of those shifts and transitions within how education is delivered and consumed is one of those things that I'm watching, and with curiosity to begin with, and just whether it will have an influence on Vassar, in which case we need to be ready to make our own changes.
Yeah, I can the got milk thing was yeah, as soon as you said it, I was like, yeah. Um, okay, we're gonna shine the spotlight a little on you. Don't get scared. But this is my favorite question to ask people in a leadership position, and that is, I think sometimes, you know, yes, it's great hearing about all the successes, but it's equally valuable to learn about some of the failures or some of the hard challenges that you faced. I'm wondering if you would be open to sharing, maybe something you learned the hard way, which ended up, giving you a great gift.
Mhm. Well, that example I gave you about Workday was one of the hard lessons. I was not leading the team, but I was a big part of the team at the time. And so it was something that has been a challenge for me. I think, I made the commentary about being kind of a servant leader and wanting to be there to build the team up. That works a lot, but as I mentioned before, you need to pair that with the accountability aspect of it. That is something that I think I did learn the hard way initially. Sometimes when you approach the work that way, you end up carrying more of the water, so to speak, than you should be, and it pushed me to working more hours, but also not having the time to get to the things that I really need to be doing in my role. And so learning that lesson allowed me to put the work back where it belonged, have the accountability, but also have the support aspect associated with that. And I think that balance in there is really important. You don't just want to come in with the hammer and kind of say, do it, get it done. But you also don't want to be doing the work yourself, because that's the whole point of a team, is to make sure the work gets spread out, and you need the team in order to be able to do the work that you need to do, and they need to be doing the work that they need to be doing. So that's one of the things I think I learned the hard way.
Yeah, that's wise advice. Yes. Take notes. If you're listening to the podcast, jot that down. um, okay. So right now in your role personally, is there anything going on at Vassar that you're especially excited about or that you'd like to share that you're working on?
Sure. I would say I mentioned before that the biggest part of the work is the other duties as assigned, and there are oftentimes projects that will come up that it's very unclear where it should go, and it is not unusual for it to come to the business office. So one of those examples is related to some off-campus development. We survey the students who get admitted to Vassar but choose not to come, to understand what causes them to choose not to come to Vassar. And there's a wealth of things in there, but one of the things that came out is that the town is an inhibitor to students choosing Vassar. And it's not that the town of Poughkeepsie, where Vassar is not a nice town, but immediately adjacent to Vassar is not a lot for students to do, not a lot of activities, kind of quiet. So it doesn't feel like a college town. And that's what we're learning from that. So we have partnered with a developer to quietly acquire a number of properties right adjacent to the campus. And now we've accumulated enough that we're planning on redevelopment of that space to bring more density and more activity to the area in a way that will hopefully improve the brand of Vassar and the perception of potential students to continue to have a strong pipeline of students coming in here. And we're working with a developer because they'll have the experience to do this in a way that we wouldn't, because we know how to build dorms, not necessarily do a mixed use development. And anytime Vassar's name gets involved, the price in the neighborhood goes up threefold. And so it helps us be efficient. And as we go through this, we're likely going to build some more affordable housing, some additional retail that we're going to try and bring activities for the students and all the rest of the community to engage in, as well as some other retail activities and some outdoor event space where we could do activities. So it's going to be kind of a fun project, something outside the norm you would never have expected to do in thinking about higher ed finance, but it'll be kind of fun and interesting. And I think it'll bring a lot to the community.
Yeah, I can see why you're excited about that. That's really cool. Congratulations on that.
Oh, thanks. Long ways to go.
Yeah. Okay. 2 questions left. One is thinking about little baby Bryan when you're just getting started, kind of developing yourself as a leader. What words of advice or maybe just encouragement or any other sage wisdom that you might share to a baby Bryan who's kind of just getting started?
Yeah. So looking back over my career, there are a couple of things that I learned that actually worked out. And so the first is be open to opportunities. You never know what project, role, skill that you could build through a new opportunity will be the skill that will help you advance throughout your career. And so don't be afraid to try something new, experiment, and get out and broaden your perspective through trying different things. The other is spend time getting to know the organization that in which you work and try and do that broadly. Learn about lots of different areas. As a finance professional, particularly in a CFO role, you will get involved in all kinds of things, and you need to know enough about them to be able to bring some advice and understanding. You're not going to be the expert in everything, but if you don't understand the organization, you can't bring good advice, or the advice won't be as strong. And so get out and learn the organization and push yourself outside the comfort zone and start building relationships early. Relationships really do underline a lot of things as it relates to building your career and being successful in the work that you do, or at least that I do. Because that network will help you find your next job, potentially, will recommend you for something. They'll also come seek you out for advice, which will potentially give you exposure to other things. Again, broadening your experience. So build those relationships because they will serve the work that you do very well as your career.
Love all that. And it's applicable across industry. So
It really is, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The final question, the legacy question. What do you hope to be remembered for at Vassar? What is the legacy you hope to leave behind there?
Yeah. So Vassar has been around for, let's call it 160 plus years. Hopefully we'll be around for 160 plus more. So simplistically, I hope to leave Vassar better off than when I started. And I joined shortly after the financial crisis. So theoretically, that should be easy because that was a challenging time. And we've made some changes along the way where we are improving the budget model, and we've, created more funds to do renewal work. We didn't talk about this, but one other project that was really interesting is we built an institute for the liberal arts, which is a hotel, a conference center, and a restaurant that we put outward-facing educational programs on, which has been really interesting to work on. Mm-hmm. So I feel like the bones are in place for Vassar to be strong when I leave than when I came. Higher ed's kind of in a difficult moment, so I guess the jury's still a little bit out, but that's really what I look for. I really hope the things that motivate me are creating value for the organization which I'm in and continually learning. And those are things I've been able to do. And so that's my goal here. I also am a little bit outside of the work. Part of the reason why I was interested in doing this is because I think there's an opportunity to create a strong pipeline of ready finance leaders in higher ed, which is kind of thin at the moment. There's been a lot of turnover. A lot of people have retired. And so through this work with Akubo, because I'm on the Akubo board, I also lead a mentoring program there, trying to help develop future leaders. And so I hope that we can use that to develop those strong future leaders who will step in as we continue to have turnover, because I do believe that the right finance leaders who can communicate those kind of complicated things and build those relationships with people, build trust, can really contribute to higher ed over the long term. And so those are the two things that I hope to kind of leave with higher ed and with Vassar over time.
Yeah, such meaningful work. And I have no doubt that you will have the impact that you want to have.
Right.
Yeah. So, Bryan, this has been such an insightful conversation. You've given us a behind the scenes look at what it really takes to keep an institution not just running, but thriving with both intention and integrity, from navigating financial complexity to leading across multiple operational worlds. It is clear that this kind of work requires both precision and vision, and you brought both of those to the table today. So thank you so much for joining us on CBO Speaks.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Yeah. And to our listeners, if you found value in today's episode, be sure to subscribe, share it with a colleague, and stay tuned for more conversations with the leaders who are shaping the future of organizations everywhere. I'm your host, Melissa Farley, and until next time, keep leading with purpose. Okay, I'm going to hit end stream.
All right.